The unseen threat. It started with a strange signal, a low, rhythmic hum that echoed through Earth's space monitoring stations, almost like a whisper. At first, no one took it seriously. It was just a glitch, or so they thought. But then the hum grew louder, clearer, and more frequent. It was no longer something they could ignore. The signal came from deep space, far beyond any known human colonies. The Earth's most advanced technology couldn't trace it. The signal was like nothing they had ever encountered. It wasn't from any human ship, nor from any alien race that Earth had established communication with. There was nothing to explain it. And that's what scared them the most. General Allison Harper, a senior officer in the Earth's Galactic Defense Network, was the first to take the signal seriously. She had been part of the defense team for years and had seen the worst humanity could face. But this was different. This wasn't like any other anomaly or disturbance they had dealt with before. The signal seemed to be coming from a point far outside their reach, and its frequency was unlike anything Earth's technology had been designed to detect. Harper stood in the darkened control room, staring at the screen. Her fingers hovered over the controls, trying to make sense of the data. The signal was too complex, too deliberate. There was intelligence behind it. She could feel it, even if no one else could. "Is anyone else picking this up?" she asked, her voice cutting through the stillness. The room fell silent, save for the soft hum of computers. No one responded. They were all too busy trying to decode the message. "Keep trying," she ordered, her voice firm. "This could be the first step in an invasion, or worse, a silent attack. We need to know what we're dealing with." As the hours passed, the signal intensified. It was no longer just a series of beeps and hisses. It was a message, one that was becoming increasingly clear. General Harper wasn't sure who was behind it, but she knew one thing: Earth was not ready for what was coming. Meanwhile, in the heart of Earth's political and military establishment, leaders were debating what to do. The government received frequent updates from General Harper's team, but nothing made sense. Why would an alien race suddenly decide to make contact with Earth? And if it wasn't contact, then what was it? The silence from space was maddening. No one had ever faced this before. Earth had fought wars, but nothing on this scale, nothing against a threat that didn't reveal itself clearly. No one knew who or what they were up against. It felt like being stalked in the dark by an unseen predator, knowing that danger was coming but having no idea where or when it would strike. General Harper had her own suspicions. She had been in the military long enough to recognize that silence was never a good sign. The aliens she had studied had always made their intentions clear from the start. Whether through communication or force, they never kept things hidden for long. But this was different. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the signal stopped. No warning, no trace. One moment, it filled every station, every ear on Earth. The next, it was gone, as if it had never existed. But that wasn't the end. No, it was just the beginning. Harper's gut told her that something was coming. Something big. And whatever it wasn't going to be friendly. The absence of the signal sent a wave of unease across Earth's defense systems. No one knew if the silence meant the threat had passed, or if it was merely the calm before the storm. The government ordered a full investigation into every space station, every satellite, every piece of technology that might offer an explanation. But all the while, the question remained: what had they just heard? Earth's military leaders scrambled to prepare for something they could not fully understand. In an instant, military bases across the globe went into high alert. Every defense system was activated. Every ship in Earth's fleet was readied for deployment. But even as they prepared, they could feel it. The weight of uncertainty. Some tried to calm the public, assuring them that it was likely nothing, just a strange cosmic phenomenon that had no real significance. But in their hearts, everyone knew that the unknown could be far more dangerous than anything they could predict. The next few days were a blur of panic and confusion. Reports from space monitoring stations were filled with more uncertainty, more fragmented data that led nowhere. And then, just when Earth thought it might have a moment of peace, something happened that no one was ready for. The first ship arrived. It wasn't a ship from any known species. It didn't fit the designs of any alien civilization Earth had cataloged. It was unlike anything the military had ever seen. This massive vessel appeared without warning, tearing through space at unimaginable speeds, coming from the depths of the galaxy like a shadow that refused to be ignored. The ship was followed by another, then another. In a matter of hours, there were thousands of ships. Thousands. And they weren't just any ships. They were warships. The skies were no longer quiet. The fleet was massive, each warship larger than anything Earth had ever built. They moved in perfect synchronization, with a single purpose, as if they had been waiting for this moment for eons. Earth's military was caught off guard, still trying to make sense of the first attack. The ships didn't fire immediately. They didn't need to. Their mere presence was enough to send shockwaves through Earth's defenses. The world had never faced a threat like this before. A true alien invasion, not just a few ships, but an armada that had come to Earth with one thing in mind: domination. In every country, every city, every corner of Earth, people looked to the skies. Fear spread quickly. The question on everyone's mind was the same. What did they want? What did these ships mean? And more importantly, were they coming for Earth's people? General Harper looked at the screen, her heart pounding. It wasn't just an invasion. It was the beginning of something far worse. The unseen threat had become the very thing humanity feared most. The Earth's defenses had always been prepared for any scenario. At least, that's what they thought. But nothing could prepare them for what was coming. Thousands of warships, gleaming darkly against the endless stars, appeared in Earth's skies. They moved with terrifying precision, as if this had all been planned for centuries, every ship in perfect formation, not a single one out of place. The world's leaders scrambled to figure out what to do. The military was put on high alert, but no one had any clear answers. They had expected conflicts, but not this. This wasn't like any invasion they had ever encountered. There were no demands, no communication, just the ships, silently hovering, threatening without uttering a word. General Harper stood at the control center, her mind racing. The fleet was massive, larger than any Earth ship, far beyond their military's capabilities. It was clear now. This wasn't a simple raid or a small force from some rogue species. This was an organized force. This was an invasion. "Have we identified any ships?" she asked, her voice tight with tension. The tech officer shook his head. "No, General. We've never seen ships like these. They're not in our database. Not even the highest classified archives have anything on them." "Have you tried communicating with them?" Harper asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. No response. Nothing. "We've sent several messages, but the ships are completely silent," came the reply. Harper felt her chest tighten. Silence was never a good sign. Silence meant that the enemy wasn't interested in negotiations, but in domination. She had faced alien conflicts before, but this was different. The sheer number of ships, their silent threat, it was like a shadow slowly falling over the Earth, and they were powerless to stop it. Back on Earth, panic began to spread like wildfire. People watched in fear as the armada hovered above their cities. The ships didn't descend, didn't attack, yet. They just watched. The atmosphere was thick with unease. What did they want? What was their purpose? There was no answer. Just the waiting, the looming dread of an unknown enemy who could strike at any moment. The devastation had been swift. Cities turned to rubble, governments shattered, and Earth's proudest monuments reduced to ash. The silence that followed the destruction was deafening. A planet, once bustling with life and ambition, now lay in ruin, the streets empty, the skies darkened by the smoke of the fallen cities. There were no celebrations, No grand speeches from the invaders, only the oppressive silence of their ships hovering above, watching, waiting for whatever came next. The world was in shock. No one knew how to react to something so overwhelming. In the aftermath of the destruction, survivors stumbled through the wreckage. The streets, once filled with the hum of daily life, now echoed with the sound of distant cries and the collapse of unstable structures. People were lost, scattered, and broken. Humanity had never faced a threat like this before. General Harper stood at the command center, staring at the monitor in front of her, a blank expression on her face. Her eyes were tired, bloodshot from sleepless nights spent trying to plan for a victory that now seemed impossible. The destruction had been far worse than anyone had anticipated. It wasn't just the technology the enemy had, no, it was their speed, their ruthless precision. The warships had arrived without warning, without any communication, and within moments they had struck with such deadly force that humanity was left reeling, unsure of where to even begin in retaliation. "We can't just let this happen," General Harper muttered, more to herself than anyone else in the room. Her officers exchanged uneasy glances. They were all feeling the weight of their helplessness. Earth's finest military strategies had been rendered useless against an enemy so far beyond their capabilities. They had underestimated the invaders, and now it seemed almost too late to try and fight back. "General, we've been analyzing their attack patterns," one of the officers spoke up, his voice hoarse. "We think we may have found a way to strike back, but it's a long shot. If we miss, we'll lose everything." Harper turned to him, her gaze sharp. "Tell me." The officer pressed a button on the console, and a map of Earth appeared on the screen. The military had been tracking the invaders' movements, studying their attacks, looking for any patterns, anything that could help them understand how to fight back. Slowly, a red circle appeared over the location of the invaders' main fleet. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. "We think we've pinpointed a weakness in their fleet," the officer continued. "It's a risky plan, but we could launch a targeted strike at their command ship. If we can take that down, it could destabilize their entire fleet. We might have a chance." Harper considered this for a moment. A strike against their command ship. It was bold, dangerous, and incredibly risky. But what choice did they have? The Earth had already been brought to its knees. A strategic attack like this could be their only chance at survival. "Prepare the fleet," Harper ordered firmly, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "We're going to do this, but make no mistake, we may not get another shot." The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone knew this was their last chance, their final gamble. There would be no coming back if they failed. But if they succeeded, it could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. As the preparations for the counterstrike began, Harper stood at the window, looking out at the ruins of her planet. She had seen war before, but nothing like this. This wasn't just a fight for land or resources. It was a fight for the very existence of humanity. The invaders hadn't just attacked, they had humiliated Earth, showing its weakness in the face of their might. But humanity had always been resilient, always found a way to survive. Now, it was time to prove it again. Far above Earth, the invaders' warships remained silent, their dark forms casting a shadow over the planet. Their movements were precise, synchronized, as if they had a plan, a strategy that Earth could not hope to understand. But the humans were about to show them that they weren't as helpless as they appeared. Despite the overwhelming power of the invaders, there was one thing they hadn't accounted for: the fighting spirit of humanity. The countdown to the counterattack began. Earth's fleet, made up of the last remaining warships, prepared to launch their strike. Each soldier aboard those ships knew the odds. It was a near impossible mission, one that would require everything they had. There would be no retreat, no second chances. But if they succeeded, the tide of the war could shift. As the countdown reached its final seconds, General Harper felt a sense of resolve wash over her. This was the moment that would define the future of humanity. And no matter the cost, they would not give up. They would show the invaders the true strength of Earth, one last stand to prove that humanity was not so easily crushed. With a deep breath, Harper issued the order, "Launch." And in that instant, the warships blasted off from Earth, streaking toward the invaders' fleet, the flames of retaliation lighting up the darkened sky. It was a shot in the dark, a desperate last stand. But if humanity was going to survive, they had to give everything they had. This was their chance, and they would take it. The warships of Earth surged forward, their engines roaring as they ripped through space at full speed. The invaders' fleet, still hovering ominously above Earth, remained unaware of the human strike force's approach. General Harper's plan had been risky, relying on speed, surprise, and the hope that their enemy would not anticipate such an aggressive counterattack. As the human ships moved closer to the heart of the invaders' fleet, the tension aboard the command ships was palpable. Crew members worked tirelessly, coordinating their ships' movements, making last-minute adjustments to their weapons systems, and ensuring that every possible precaution had been taken. Despite the daunting odds, there was a quiet sense of resolve among the humans. They had been pushed to the brink, and now they were going to make their enemies regret underestimating them. "Lock on their command ship," Harper ordered, her voice steady, but filled with a quiet fury. The mission was clear: take out the heart of the enemy fleet, their command vessel. Without it, the invaders would be disorganized, vulnerable. If they could just break through the heavy defenses, they could strike a decisive blow. The countdown to impact began. There were just moments left before the assault would begin. Inside the warships, the soldiers were silent, some praying, others steeling themselves for the inevitable fight. It was a dangerous mission, one that would almost certainly cost many lives, but it was also humanity's only chance at survival, and they would take it. The first shots were fired. Brilliant beams of energy cut through the darkness of space, striking the invaders' defenses. Earth's warships, though far less advanced, used their remaining firepower with deadly precision. The sound of the weapons was almost deafening, reverberating through the hulls of the ships as the energy blasts ripped into the invaders' shields. It was a testament to humanity's resilience, their willingness to fight back even against overwhelming odds. General Harper watched the battle unfold on her command screen. The invaders' ships were massive, their technology far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. But Earth's fighters had one thing the invaders didn't: a deep, unrelenting will to protect their home and their people. As the energy blasts continued to strike the invaders' shields, the invaders' ships began to show signs of stress. Their shields flickered, small sections of their enormous fleet vulnerable. "They're weakening," one of the officers called out. The hope that had been smothered by weeks of terror began to rise in their hearts. Perhaps this was the breakthrough they had been hoping for. But the invaders were far from helpless. They quickly regrouped, their ships spinning and shifting in perfect formation. Their powerful weapons fired back, releasing waves of devastating energy that ripped into the human fleet. The shockwaves of the explosions tore through space like thunderclaps, sending human ships spiraling out of control. "Brace for impact," Harper shouted, gripping her chair as the shaking intensified. The sound of distant explosions and the flashing lights of battle were the only things that filled the silence as the humans fought to stay on course. One of the ships under Harper's command took a direct hit. The blast struck the hull, sending it careening off course as it began to break apart. There were no survivors from the crew, only the wreckage left floating in space, a grim reminder of how high the stakes were. Harper gritted her teeth as she watched the debris disappear into the void, her heart heavy with the weight of the loss. But there was no time to mourn. She had a mission to complete. "Focus on the command ship," Harper ordered, her eyes narrowing as the target loomed ahead. The invaders were trying to regroup, sending out reinforcements from their immense fleet. But Harper's forces had made it through, and now they were closer than ever to taking down the heart of the enemy. The invaders had made a grave mistake by underestimating the fighting spirit of humanity. One last push was all they needed. The humans' weapons fired with everything they had left, sending a final barrage of missiles toward the command ship. Energy beams cut through the darkness like rays of hope, each shot bringing them closer to their goal. Then, with a flash that lit up the battlefield, the invaders' command ship began to shudder. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The entire enemy fleet seemed to hold its breath. Unsure of what was happening, the shields had collapsed. The powerful vessel, once thought invincible, was now vulnerable, its massive hull cracking under the pressure of the human assault. General Harper felt her heart race. The moment they had fought for was now within their grasp. The final missile hit its target, and the command ship exploded in a brilliant eruption of fire and light, a shockwave that tore through the space around it. The invader fleet was thrown into disarray. The once coordinated, powerful force was now scrambling to regroup, their unity shattered by the loss of their central command. "Yes," Harper shouted, her fist pumping the air. The command ship was gone. The tide of the battle had shifted. But the victory was far from complete. The remaining invader ships were still formidable, and they would not surrender easily. Harper knew that the real fight had only just begun. They had taken down the heart of the fleet, but now they needed to finish what they had started. The battle for Earth was far from over, and humanity had no choice but to keep pushing forward, no matter the cost. The fight for survival had only just begun, and with each passing second, the stakes grew higher. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, but the survivors aboard Earth's warships knew one thing for certain. They were not going to give up. Not now. Not ever. The explosion of the invaders' command ship sent shockwaves through space, the remnants of the massive vessel disintegrating in a cloud of fiery debris. It was a moment of triumph, but it also marked the beginning of a new, even more intense phase of the battle. The remaining invader ships, though stunned by the loss of their flagship, quickly regrouped and retaliated with a brutal, relentless force. The humans had dealt them a blow, but the war was far from over. General Harper stood tall in the command center, her face a mask of determination. Her heart was heavy with the loss of so many ships, so many brave men and women. But they had won a crucial victory, and now they needed to push forward, capitalizing on the momentum. The invaders were wounded, and it was time to finish the job. "Move in closer," Harper ordered, her voice calm but resolute. "We need to take down their remaining warships before they can reorganize." The human fleet, battered but unbroken, surged forward. Their ships, though smaller and less technologically advanced than the invaders, were built for this moment. Close quarters combat, a relentless offensive that pushed forward no matter the cost. The crew members aboard each ship were prepared for the worst, their minds focused solely on the mission ahead. "Prepare all weapons systems," Commander Johnson said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Target their engines and weapons systems. We cripple them now, or we risk losing everything." On the front lines, the remaining invader ships began to regroup, sending out smaller squadrons to harass the humans and buy time for their larger vessels to regain control. They were powerful, their weapons systems devastating, but their numbers were now dwindling, and while they still held a technological advantage, they lacked the coordination that they once had when the command ship was still operational. As the first few rounds of battle were exchanged, the human warships took the brunt of the damage. Energy beams sliced through their hulls, sparks and flames filling the screens of the command rooms as systems flickered in and out of operation. It was a brutal, unforgiving fight. But humanity was not about to back down. In the midst of the chaos, Harper saw an opportunity. One of the remaining invader ships, a massive destroyer, had broken away from the pack. It was vulnerable, isolated, and if they could hit it hard enough, they might be able to cripple the invaders' entire offensive. "Set course for that destroyer," Harper commanded. "Full speed ahead, all weapons primed." Her ship lurched forward. A coordinated volley of firepower launched in unison. The destroyer, realizing too late that it was under attack, tried to reposition, But it was too slow. The first few energy blasts struck the ship's shields, causing them to flicker and weaken. Then the humans' missiles hit, tearing through the weakened defenses and sending an explosion tearing through the ship's hull. The invader destroyer started to break apart, its crew desperately attempting to save it. "Direct hit," Commander Johnson shouted. "It's going down." The destroyer shuddered violently before its entire aft section was blown off in a brilliant flash of light. The remaining enemy ships, realizing that their strongest force was being destroyed, began to retreat. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. The human fleet, though battered, pursued with unrelenting force. As the invaders scattered, the survivors of the human fleet closed in, their firepower a force to be reckoned with. It was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a battle for revenge. Harper watched the destruction unfold on her screens, her eyes scanning the remaining enemy fleet. They were on the run. The invaders had not counted on Earth's resilience, on the spirit of humanity that refused to be crushed. Every weapon, every ship, every life was now focused on one goal: to end this war, once and for all. But even as they pushed forward, Harper knew the fight was far from over. The invaders, though retreating, were not defeated. They had more ships, more soldiers, and they were not about to let humanity win so easily. There would be more battles ahead, more losses, and more sacrifices. Harper gritted her teeth, her resolve hardening. The war was far from over, but they had taken a decisive step forward. The invaders had crossed a line, and now humanity was showing them the true cost of their mistake. They had underestimated the strength of Earth, of the people who called it home. But the cost of victory had been high. The humans had lost so many ships, so many lives. Their warships, battered and burned, limped back into formation, their crew members exhausted but proud of what they had accomplished. The threat of the invaders had not been fully erased, but for the first time since the war had begun, humanity had the upper hand. "We're not done yet," Harper whispered to herself, watching as the enemy ships retreated into the vastness of space. "We'll make them regret every move they've made." Her ship creaked under the strain of the battle, but it remained operational. The war was far from over, but humanity's fire burned brighter than ever. They would fight to the end. The retreat of the invaders was not the end of the battle. No, it was only the beginning of the final confrontation. Humanity had tasted victory, but the taste was bitter, for every moment of triumph was paid for with blood. The fleet had been decimated. Ships that once glimmered with the hope of a bright future now floated through space, broken and charred. The sound of alarms still echoed in the control rooms of many ships, the crew members moving quickly to patch up what remained of their defenses. General Harper stood in front of the large view screen, her eyes scanning the stars. She could still feel the heat of the explosion that tore apart the enemy command ship, the screams of the crew reverberating in her ears. But there was no time to mourn. Not yet. Not while there was still a war to win. "We've taken a few ships down, but the invaders are still out there," Harper said, her voice calm but strained. "We need to push forward, take the fight to them, and finish what we started." Commander Johnson nodded, his face grim. He'd been at the front lines since the first wave, and every ship lost had been a personal blow to him. But Harper's orders were clear, and they would not back down. "I'll take the fleet into deep space. We'll track their movements and hit them where they least expect it. We'll make them pay for their arrogance." "Good," Harper said. "But remember, we can't just strike blindly. We need to be strategic. They'll be licking their wounds, but they still have the advantage of numbers." Despite the exhaustion, the human fleet rallied under Harper's command. Ships reconfigured, new strategies were formed, and every soldier, every pilot, was ready to face whatever came next. But the invaders had learned from their mistakes. They were not as hasty now, not as eager to charge into battle. They knew the human fleet was no longer an easy target, and they would come prepared. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, the invader leaders convened in a private meeting. Their ships, while still numerous, had suffered irreparable damage, and they were forced to rethink their strategy. No longer would they rely on overwhelming numbers. No, they needed a new plan, one that would crush the humans before they could grow any stronger. "We underestimated them," the leader of the invaders said, his voice dripping with rage. "We thought their ships would break under the weight of our firepower, but they held strong. They fought back with a ferocity we did not anticipate." His advisor nodded, glancing at the holographic projections of the battle. "The humans are resilient, but we still have the advantage of numbers. We can outlast them, wear them down. But we need to hit them hard before they can regroup." "Agreed," the leader said, slamming his fist on the table. "We will launch a counterattack, a decisive strike, one that will break their spirit. We'll take out their remaining fleets, one by one, and we'll do it in such a way that they'll never dare rise again." Across the galaxy, the invader fleets were preparing for one last strike. It would be their final push, their last effort to crush humanity once and for all. But what they didn't realize was that humanity was already preparing for them, too. Back on Earth, General Harper's eyes never wavered from the battle display. Her mind raced with calculations, strategies, and countermeasures. She had seen the invaders retreat, and she knew they would come back, stronger and more determined. But the humans had one thing the invaders didn't: a relentless will to survive. The human fleet began to move, picking up speed as they entered deep space, navigating through asteroid fields, and shifting their positions with surgical precision. Every ship was moving like a single, united entity, a living force determined to eradicate the invader threat once and for all. "Stay sharp, everyone," Harper ordered, her voice cool but urgent. "The enemy is out there, and they're regrouping. We're going to hit them where it hurts." As the fleet moved further into the unknown, Harper felt the tension in the air. This was it. This was the moment when everything would come to a head. Either the invaders would crush humanity once and for all, or humanity would rise, stronger than ever before, and wipe out the invader threat once and for all. The two fleets were on a collision course, each unaware of how close they were to the other, both preparing for a fight that would determine the fate of their worlds. It was the calm before the storm. And then, without warning, the first shots rang out. The battle had begun. The shockwaves of the first shots rocked the human fleet, and every ship shuddered as the weapons fire flew through space. The once calm expanse of the galaxy had been transformed into a deadly battlefield. The invaders had come with a vengeance, their ships now organized and focused, their weapons more powerful than before. They intended to finish what they had started and erase humanity from the stars. But what the invaders hadn't counted on was the humans' sheer determination. They had seen the devastation, felt the pain of loss, and now, with their backs against the wall, they fought like never before. General Harper stood at the heart of the human fleet, watching as her ships weaved through the chaos of enemy fire, their weapons flashing brightly as they returned fire with deadly accuracy. Every movement was precise, every ship positioned with calculated precision. It was a symphony of destruction, and humanity was leading the charge. "Keep them on the move. Don't let them get a clean shot at us," Harper shouted over the comms, her voice steady but urgent. The human ships were agile, evading the incoming fire as they closed in on their targets. They had learned the invaders' tactics, their patterns. The human fleet had adapted, and now they were a force to be reckoned with. Commander Johnson's voice came over the comms. "General, we've got a breach in the outer ring. The invaders are pushing through our defenses." Harper's brow furrowed. "We can't let them through. Take them out now." The human fleet responded like a well-oiled machine. Fighter jets broke off from the main ships, diving into the chaos, engaging the invader ships with unparalleled skill. Every ship and pilot moved with purpose, each knowing their role and executing it flawlessly. The human fleet was no longer just a collection of ships. They were a united force, a living, breathing entity fighting for survival. But the invaders weren't done. They retaliated with equal ferocity. their weapons tearing through the blackness of space. The battle was relentless, and both sides were suffering heavy losses. The once formidable invader ships, which had seemed invincible in the early stages of the war, were now being destroyed one by one, their commanders desperate to hold the line. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, the humans pressed on. They fought with a determination that could not be extinguished. For every ship they lost, for every life they sacrificed, they gained an inch of ground. They knew that this was their last chance, a chance to prove that no enemy, no matter how powerful, could defeat them. As the battle raged on, the space around the two fleets became an inferno of lights and explosions. Ships darted and weaved through the battlefield, engaging in fierce dogfights, missiles flying, and energy blasts lighting up the dark sky. The invaders' ships were big and imposing, but they were starting to lose their edge. The humans had outmaneuvered them, outsmarted them, and now they were paying the price. But then, a new wave of invader ships appeared. Their numbers had seemingly doubled, and they came in fast, faster than the human fleet could anticipate. It was a desperate move by the invaders, an attempt to overwhelm the human forces with sheer numbers. Harper's heart skipped a beat as she saw the new wave on the radar. Everyone, fall back, form a defensive line. The humans quickly regrouped, pulling back to form a defensive perimeter around their most critical ships. It was a risky move, but it was all they had. They had to protect their command ship, the heart of their fleet. If they lost that, they would lose the war. The invaders pressed on, pushing the humans to their limits. The battle had reached its breaking point. With every passing second, more ships were destroyed, and the void of space became littered with the debris of war. The human fleet was taking heavy damage, but they didn't stop. They couldn't. They had too much to lose. In the heart of the battle, General Harper stood firm. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She knew what was at stake, and she was willing to sacrifice everything to win this fight. "We hold this line," she said, her voice unwavering. It was in that moment, as the last wave of invader ships descended upon them, that something unexpected happened. The human fleet, battered but not broken, launched a final counterattack. It was a move born from desperation, but it was also a move fueled by rage, by the countless lives lost, by the horrors they had witnessed. They were fighting not just for survival, but for something greater, for their right to exist. The human ships surged forward, their weapons firing with deadly precision. They tore through the invader fleet, blasting apart ships with every shot. The invaders, stunned by the ferocity of the counterattack, faltered. Their command ships began to fall, their formations breaking apart under the pressure. And then, with one final decisive blow, the invader flagship exploded, sending shockwaves throughout the battlefield. The surviving invader ships scattered, retreating into the depths of space, their once formidable fleet now reduced to rubble. The human fleet, though battered and scarred, had emerged victorious. The stars seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as the last remnants of the invader fleet disappeared into the distance. The war was over, and humanity had won, but the cost had been great. The battle had been fought with the blood of countless heroes, and the scars of war would remain forever. General Harper stood on the bridge of her command ship, watching as the debris from the battle slowly drifted into the vast emptiness of space. Her face was pale, her eyes tired, but there was a look of quiet determination in her gaze. "We did it," she said softly. "We won." The war was over. The invaders had been defeated. Humanity had proven that no force, no matter how powerful, could ever break their spirit. The stars would remember this day, the day humanity, against all odds, turned the tide and showed the universe that Earth was not a place to be reckoned with. And as the human fleet drifted back toward Earth, their victory echoing across the cosmos, they knew one thing for certain. They had earned their place in the stars.